Pacific Ocean, where the waters deepened into a midnight hue and the skies mirrored the darkness of the abyss below. There existed a haunting tale, whispered among sailors and aviators alike. It was the legend of the ghostly flight attendant, a specter that haunted an abandoned aircraft, lost to the depths of the ocean. The plane, a vintage Boeing 747, had vanished without a trace during a routine flight from Tokyo to Honolulu decades ago. Its disappearance had baffled investigators and left families in mourning. But what truly perplexed those who delved into the mystery was the recurring sighting of a spectral figure, a flight attendant in the old-fashioned uniform of the 1970s, seen wandering the shores of distant islands and lurking near the wreckage that occasionally surfaced during stormy weather. One stormy night, a group of adventurous souls, drawn by the allure of the supernatural, embarked on a daring expedition to uncover the truth behind the ghostly flight attendant. Among them was Sarah, a skeptical journalist seeking a story to revive her career, and David, an intrepid photographer captivated by the unknown. Their journey led them to a secluded island, rumored to be the last known location of the ill-fated flight. As they trekked through dense foliage and navigated treacherous terrain, the atmosphere grew heavy with an otherworldly presence. Sarah dismissed it as a trick of the mind, a result of the eerie tales that had preceded their arrival. It wasn't until they stumbled upon the remnants of the aircraft, its once majestic frame now weathered and tangled with seaweed, that Sarah's skepticism wavered. The sight of the corroded fuselage and the tattered remains of seats sent a shiver down her spine, igniting a primal fear she couldn't shake. David, ever the enthusiast, began snapping photographs, capturing the haunting beauty of decay and the melancholy of lost souls. But as he focused his lens on the cockpit, a flicker of movement caught his eye. He lowered the camera, heart pounding, and gazed into the darkness beyond the shattered windshield. There, standing amidst the wreckage, was the ghostly flight attendant. Her uniform, once pristine and sky blue, was now tattered and stained with seawater. Her eyes, hollow and mournful, locked onto David's, sending a chill through his bones. Sarah, sensing his unease, turned to follow his gaze and gasped as she too beheld the spectral figure. The ghostly flight attendant beckoned to them, her outstretched hand a silent invitation to unravel the mystery that bound her to this earthly plane. Driven by curiosity and a hint of dread, Sarah and David ventured closer, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence of the abandoned aircraft. The flight attendant's form wavered, translucent yet undeniably real, as if caught between the realms of the living and the dead. With each step, the air grew colder, and whispers, indistinct but laden with sorrow, echoed through the cabin. Sarah felt a pang of empathy for the ghostly figure before them, a sense of unfinished business that transcended the boundaries of life and death. As they reached the cockpit, the flight attendant gestured toward the pilot's seat, where a weathered logbook lay open. Sarah hesitated, her journalistic instincts warring with the primal fear that gripped her. But something in the flight attendant's eyes, a plea for redemption, urged her forward. With trembling hands, she flipped through the pages of the logbook, each entry a testament to the final moments of the doomed flight. The entries spoke of turbulence and confusion, of desperate radio calls unanswered, and of a sudden plunge into darkness as the aircraft lost control. And then, amidst the chaos, a name stood out. Evelyn Monroe, the flight attendant whose spirit, now lingered within these haunted walls. Sarah felt a surge of sadness and determination intertwine within her as she realized the weight of Evelyn's story. David, capturing every moment with his camera, felt a mixture of awe and trepidation. The photographs he took seemed to blur the lines between reality and the supernatural, each image imbued with a haunting presence that transcended mere pixels. As they delved deeper into the mystery, piecing together fragments of the past, they uncovered a tale of betrayal and sacrifice. Evelyn, once a loyal and beloved member of the airline crew, had uncovered a conspiracy within the ranks, a plot to sabotage the flight for financial gain. Her attempts to alert the authorities had been thwarted, her warnings dismissed as paranoia. And so as the fateful flight took off that night, she found herself torn between duty and desperation, grappling with the knowledge that lives hung in the balance. The final entry in the logbook, penned in shaky handwriting, revealed Evelyn's harrowing decision to confront the traitor in the cockpit, to fight for the passengers she had sworn to protect. But the confrontation had ended in tragedy, the aircraft spiraling into oblivion as chaos reigned. As Sarah and David pieced together the truth, the ghostly flight attendant's form began to fade, her mission of vengeance and closure nearing its end. With a final, sorrowful glance, she vanished into the ether, leaving behind a legacy of courage and sacrifice. In the days that followed, Sarah's article detailing the untold story of Evelyn Monroe and the ghostly flight attendant captured the world's attention. The mystery of the lost aircraft took on new meaning, a cautionary tale of greed and heroism intertwined. And somewhere, in the depths of the Pacific Ocean, amidst the wreckage of a bygone era, Evelyn's spirit found peace, her restless soul finally free from the shackles of the past. As for Sarah and David, they carried the memory of their encounter with the ghostly flight attendant with them, a reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead, and the stories that linger in the shadows, waiting to be told. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We'll be back with more fascinating stories from the world of crime. Until then, stay curious and stay safe.
The airport was bustling with the usual chaos of travelers rushing to catch their flights. Among them was Amelia, a young woman in her mid-20s, nervously clutching her boarding pass. She had always been afraid of flying, but her sister's wedding in another state compelled her to face her fears. As she settled into her seat on the plane, Amelia tried to distract herself by flipping through a magazine, but as the plane taxied down the runway, her heart began to race, and her palms grew clammy. She closed her eyes and took deep breaths, trying to calm herself. After what felt like an eternity, the plane finally took off, and Amelia felt a wave of relief wash over her. She opened her eyes and glanced around the cabin, noticing the other passengers engrossed in their own activities. But something caught her eye, an ethereal figure standing at the front of the plane. It was a flight attendant dressed in a vintage uniform, complete with a pillbox hat and a scarf tied neatly around her neck. Amelia blinked, thinking it was just a trick of the light, but when she looked again, the figure was still there, smiling serenely as she went about her duties. Confused and a little unnerved, Amelia glanced at the passengers seated around her, but no one else seemed to notice the ghostly flight attendant. She rubbed her eyes, wondering if she was hallucinating. But when she looked back, the figure was still there, moving gracefully through the cabin as if she belonged. Amelia tried to shake off the feeling of unease that settled over her. Maybe it was just a prank or a marketing gimmick, she reasoned. But as the flight progressed, the presence of the ghostly flight attendant only seemed to grow stronger. She watched in silent terror as the figure floated down the aisle, serving drinks and offering snacks to the passengers. Her movements were fluid and graceful, but there was something unsettling about the way she seemed to glide effortlessly through the air. Amelia glanced around the cabin again, searching for anyone else who might have noticed the strange apparition. But the other passengers remained oblivious, their attention focused on their phones or the in-flight entertainment. As the hours passed, Amelia felt a growing sense of dread gnawing at her insides. She tried to convince herself that she was imagining things, that there had to be a logical explanation for what she was seeing. But deep down, she knew that this was no ordinary flight. The ghostly flight attendant seemed to sense Amelia's fear, drifting closer to her seat with each passing moment. Her eyes were empty voids, yet they seemed to bore into Amelia's soul, filling her with a sense of overwhelming dread. Unable to bear the tension any longer, Amelia from her seat and approached the nearest flight attendant, Olivia. Breathing one this time, she hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to explain what she had seen without sounding like a lunatic. But when she finally mustered the courage to speak, the words spilled out in a rush. "There's someone else on this plane," she stammered, her voice trembling with fear. "A ghost, I think. A flight attendant from another time." The real flight attendant regarded her with a mixture of concern and skepticism. But before she could respond, a voice crackled over the intercom. It was the captain, announcing that they were experiencing some turbulence, and advising everyone to return to their seats and fasten their seatbelts. Amelia stumbled back to her seat, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced around the cabin, half expecting to see the ghostly flight attendant hovering nearby. But there was no sign of her, just the other passengers gripping their armrests tightly as the plane jolted and shook. The turbulence seemed to last an eternity, each moment stretching out into an agonizing eternity as Amelia clung to her seat for dear life. But just when she thought she couldn't take it anymore, the shaking subsided, and the plane leveled out once again. Relief washed over Amelia in a dizzying wave, leaving her weak and trembling. She sank back into her seat, her mind reeling from the ordeal she had just endured. Had it all been a hallucination brought on by her fear of flying, or had she truly encountered something otherworldly on that plane? As the flight continued its course, Amelia tried to push the memory of the ghostly flight attendant to the back of her mind. But no matter how hard she tried to forget, the image of that ethereal figure remained etched in her memory, haunting her every thought. When the plane finally touched down at its destination, Amelia practically ran off the aircraft, eager to escape the confines of the cabin and put the ordeal behind her. But as she stepped out into the terminal, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see the ghostly flight attendant standing there, her empty eyes fixed on Amelia's retreating form. But the terminal was crowded with bustling travelers, and there was no sign of the spectral presence that had haunted her flight. With a shudder, Amelia turned away and hurried toward the exit, eager to leave the nightmare behind her. But as she stepped out into the cool night air, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had not seen the last of the ghostly flight attendant, that somewhere, out there in the darkness, she was still watching, waiting to claim her next unsuspecting victim. The night was still, the airport quite safe for the hum of distant engines. Flight 731 awaited its passengers, gleaming under the cold fluorescent lights of the terminal. Among the crowd gathered at Gate 13, I stood, a seasoned traveler with an appetite for adventure. Little did I know that night would mark the beginning of a journey far darker than any turbulence or missed connection. Boarding commenced without incident. As I settled into my seat, a sense of unease settled over me. The air felt heavy, charged with energy I couldn't quite place. Glancing around, noticed a flight attendant making her rounds. There was something off about her, something unnerving in the way she moved, like a specter drifting through the cabin. According to the badge pinned to her uniform, it was Elena. She appeared to be in her mid-30s, with striking blue eyes that seemed to pierce through the veil of reality. As she approached, a chill ran down my spine, and I quickly averted my gaze. Throughout the flight, Elena's presence loomed large, her silent vigil unsettling the passengers. There were whispers among the crew, rumors of strange occurrences linked to her past. Some said she was cursed, others claimed she was merely a pawn in a much darker game. It happened midway through the flight, as we soared through the inky blackness of the night sky. A commotion erupted near the front of the plane, drawing the attention of both passengers and crew. A young woman, pale and trembling, stood in the aisle, her eyes wide with terror. "He's gone," she cried, her voice trembling with fear. "He was sitting right next to me, and now he's gone." Panic spread like wildfire through the cabin as passengers searched frantically for the missing man. The crew sprang into action, combing every inch of the aircraft for any sign of him. But despite their efforts, he had vanished without a trace. As the hours passed, a sense of dread settled over the plane like a suffocating fog. Whispers of the supernatural filled the air, tales of ghostly apparitions haunting the skies. And at the center of it all was Elena, her presence casting a pall over the entire ordeal. It was then that I first saw her, standing at the front of the plane, her eyes fixed on the empty seat where the missing passenger had sat. There was a sadness in her gaze, a sorrow that seemed to transcend time and space. And as our eyes met, I felt a chill run down my spine, as if I were staring into the abyss itself. As the night wore on, the truth began to unravel like a frayed tapestry. The missing passenger was not the first to vanish aboard Flight 731. Nor would he be the last. For years, the plane had been plagued by mysterious disappearances, each one more baffling than the last. And at the heart of it all was Elena, the enigmatic flight attendant with a secret buried deep within her soul. For you see, Elena was not of this world. She was a ghost, cursed to wander the earth for all eternity, her restless spirit bound to the confines of the aircraft. As dawn broke on the horizon, the truth became clear. Flight 731 was not just a vessel for transporting passengers from one destination to another. It was a prison, a purgatory for lost souls trapped between the realms of the living and the dead. With a heavy heart, I watched as the plane made its final descent, touching down on the runway with a deafening roar. As the passengers disembarked, I lingered behind, unable to shake the feeling that I was leaving something behind. And as I stepped off the plane for the final time, I glanced back one last time, my heart heavy with sorrow. For in that moment, I knew that Flight 731 would forever be etched in my memory, a haunting reminder of the thin veil that separates the world of the living from the realm of the dead. The clock struck midnight as Flight 706 prepared for takeoff. Passengers shuffled onto the plane, weary-eyed and eager to reach their destinations. Among them was Olivia, a young journalist heading to a conference in New York City. Little did she know this flight would be unlike any other. As Olivia settled into her seat, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the air. The flight attendants went about their duties with practiced precision, but there was something off about one of them, a woman with pale skin and dark, hollow eyes. Olivia tried to brush off her unease as mere nerves, but as the plane ascended into the night sky, a sense of dread washed over her. She glanced around, noticing that other passengers seemed to share her apprehension. Whispers of discomfort filled the cabin, but no one dared to speak aloud what they were all thinking. Something was wrong. Hours passed, and Olivia struggled to keep her eyes open. The cabin was eerily quiet, save for the hum of the engines. Just as she was drifting off to sleep, a soft voice broke the silence. "Excuse me, miss. Can I get you anything?" Startled, Olivia looked up to see the ghostly flight attendant standing beside her seat, a faint smile playing on her lips. I'm fine, thank you." Olivia stammered, her heart pounding in her chest. But the flight attendant didn't move. Instead, she leaned in closer, her eyes bored into Olivia's soul. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "There's something you need to know about this flight." Olivia's breath caught in her throat as she gazed into the flight attendant's empty eyes, sensing an otherworldly presence looming over her. Unable to tear her gaze away, Olivia listened as the flight attendant recounted the harrowing tale of Flight 706. Decades ago, on a stormy night much like this one, the plane had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only rumors of its ghostly return. As the story unfolded, Olivia felt a chill grip her heart. Could it be true? Was she trapped on board a flight doomed to repeat its final journey for all eternity? Before she could ponder further, a sudden turbulence rocked the plane, sending passengers into a frenzy of panic. Lights flickered, and the air grew thick with fear as whispers of the past echoed through the cabin. With terror coursing through her veins, Olivia knew she had to escape the haunted confines of Flight 706. But as she frantically searched for a way out, she realized that the plane had become a labyrinth of endless corridors, twisting and turning in on themselves like a nightmare come to life. Every corner seemed to conceal a new horror, from shadowy figures lurking in the darkness to eerie whispers that echoed through the empty halls. Olivia's pulse raced as she navigated the maze, her only hope of survival resting on finding a way to break free from the ghostly grip of the plane. As Olivia delved deeper into the heart of the plane, she stumbled upon a hidden compartment, a forgotten relic of Flight 706's tragic history. Inside, she found a tattered journal belonging to the plane's former captain, its pages filled with cryptic writings detailing the events leading up to the fateful flight. With trembling hands, Olivia pieced together the captain's final moments, uncovering a truth more chilling than she could have ever imagined. The plane's disappearance had been no accident. It had been a deliberate act of sabotage, orchestrated by a sinister force hell-bent on claiming the souls of all who dared to board. Determined to expose the evil lurking within, Olivia set out to confront the ghostly presence that haunted Flight 706 once and for all. Armed with newfound courage, Olivia confronted the ghostly flight attendant, demanding answers to the mysteries that had plagued the doomed plane for decades. But as she stood face to face with the spectral figure, she realized that the true power lay not in the world of the living, but in the realm of the dead. With a final desperate plea, Olivia called upon the spirits of the past to break the curse that bound Flight 706 to its tragic fate. As the plane trembled and groaned, blinding light filled the cabin, engulfing everything in its path. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the hunting ceased. The plane shuddered to a halt, its engines falling silent as the ghostly apparitions faded into the darkness. As dawn broke on the horizon, Olivia emerged from the wreckage of Flight 706, shaken but alive. Behind her, the remnants of the cursed plane smoldered, a solemn reminder of the horrors she had faced. But as she stepped onto solid ground once more, Olivia knew that she had triumphed over the darkness that had threatened to consume her. And though the memories of that fateful flight would haunt her for the rest of her days, she also knew that she had emerged stronger, braver, and more resilient than ever before. For in the face of true terror, there is no greater victory than the courage to confront the unknown and emerge unscathed on the other side. And as Olivia watched the sun rise on a new day, She knew that she was ready to face whatever horrors the future may hold. The hum of the engines echoed through the cabin as Flight 777 soared through the midnight skies. It was a routine red-eye flight, with passengers nestled in their seats, seeking respite from the world below. Among them was Emma, a flight attendant with an air of mystery about her. Her deep, soulful eyes seemed to hold secrets untold, and her quiet demeanor hid a tumultuous past. As Emma made her rounds through the cabin, attending to the needs of the passengers, her gaze lingered on one individual. His name was David, a weary traveler with a troubled heart. There was something about him that drew Emma in, a magnetic pull she couldn't quite explain. David seemed lost in thought, his eyes haunted by memories that refused to fade. As the hours passed and the plane sailed through the night, Emma found herself drawn to David like a moth to a flame. She couldn't shake the feeling that their meeting was fated, as though they were bound by invisible threads woven by the hands of destiny. During a lull in the flight, Emma approached David with a gentle smile. "Is there anything I can get for you, sir?" she asked, her voice soft and soothing. David looked up, startled by her presence. No thank you. I'm fine," he replied, his voice tinged with sadness. Emma's heart ached at the pain she saw reflected in his eyes. Without thinking, she reached out and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You seem troubled, David. Is there anything you'd like to talk about?" she offered, her voice filled with empathy. David hesitated, unsure whether to confide in this stranger who seemed to see straight through him. But there was something about Emma that made him want to open, to share the burden that weighed heavily on his soul. "I've lost someone dear to me," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "She was the love of my life, and I can't shake the feeling that I failed her somehow." Emma listened intently as David poured out his heart, his words a balm to her own wounded spirit. She sensed a connection between them, a shared pain that transcended time and space. As the plane continued its journey through the night, Emma found herself drawn deeper into David's world. She learned of his love for Sarah, a vibrant soul whose light had been extinguished far too soon, and she sensed his desperation to find closure, to lay his demons to rest once and for all. Driven by a force beyond her control, Emma made a decision that would change the course of their lives forever. She would use her knowledge of the dark arts to help David find the peace he so desperately sought. It was a dangerous gamble, one that could cost her everything, but she was willing to risk it all for a chance at redemption. Under the cover of darkness, Emma retreated to the secluded corner of the plane where she performed her rituals. With trembling hands, she gathered the necessary ingredients and lit the candles that would summon the spirits of the beyond. And as she chanted the ancient incantations, she felt a surge of power coursing through her veins, binding her fate to David's in ways she could never have imagined. Meanwhile, David sat alone in his seat, his mind consumed by thoughts of Sarah. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was still with him, watching over him from beyond the grave. And as he closed his eyes and drifted into a fitful sleep, he felt her presence surrounding him like a warm embrace. But what David didn't realize was that Emma's magic had unleashed forces far beyond his comprehension. As he slept, his dreams were invaded by strange visions and ominous whispers that seemed to echo from the depths of the abyss. When he awoke, David found himself in a state of confusion, unsure whether what he had experienced was real or merely a trick of his mind. And as he looked into Emma's eyes, he saw a flicker of doubt, a hint of fear that sent a shiver down his spine. As the hours passed, the plane drew closer to its destination. Emma and David found themselves locked in a battle against unseen forces. The line between reality and illusion began to blur, and they struggled to distinguish between truth and deception. But amidst the chaos and confusion, a glimmer of hope emerged. With Emma's guidance, David began to unravel the mysteries of his past. piecing together the fragments of his shattered memories. And as he delved deeper into the darkness that lurked within him, he discovered a strength he never knew he possessed. Together, they faced their fears head-on, confronting the demons that threatened to tear them apart. And as the first light of dawn broke through the clouds, they emerged victorious, their bond stronger than ever before. As Flight 777 touched down on solid ground, Emma and David stepped off the plane, their hearts filled with a sense of renewal. Though their journey had been fraught with danger and uncertainty, they had emerged unscathed, their spirits lifted by the promise of a brighter tomorrow. And as they parted ways, each heading off into the unknown, they knew that their paths would inevitably cross again, for they were bound by a connection that transcended time and space, a bond forged in the crucible of adversity and tempered by the fires of love. And together, they would face whatever the future held, united in their quest for redemption and renewal.